Cuán hermoso su nombre es, cuán hermoso su nombre es, el nombre de Jesús, mi Rey. Cuán hermoso.
Matthew 26, 36, 39. And Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go thither and pray." He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. But Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, to say it must happen in this way?" And Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour, when darkness reigns. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
Again, this is the archaeological dig. This is like brand new. I think they were trying to build something with the church, and they found like first century stuff, including a mikveh down here. And I think this is the first like actual like real connection to the first century in the garden area. Because before, like there have been several like proposals for the garden, because it's very hard to find, the garden, right? But this is like a real sort of connection that there were first century things here. Okay, and so in Joel 3, it says that Yahweh will gather nations to judge them in this valley. Okay, and then in the other valley, Gehinnom, that's the valley of like what's normally translated hell in your Bible, or yeah. Sometimes there's another word that translated that. But just to point out, like the whole like eschatological picture, like at the end, right? Judgment takes place here, hell is here, and the New Jerusalem. That's the idea. It's all together. Like it all happens in one place.
The resurrection's there.
And the resurrection's there. Yeah, actually, that's why there are so many tombs on the Mount of Olives, because they believe the resurrection will happen here, because the judgment will take place in this valley, right? That's the idea.
This is the Kidron Valley?
It's the Kidron Valley. It's also called the Valley of Jehoshaphat from Joel 3. So and then so it's the middle of the night, right? And they hold this trial, and if you notice who is holding the trial, it's the chief priests, right? It's actually, like a lot of people will say it's the Pharisees, it's really the chief priests. And they were not the same group. And if you notice in the next line, in Herod's palace with Pilate, it says early in the morning. So presumably he spends the next several hours here, right? After the trial, waiting until the morning, right? Where they would request to Pilate that he would be killed because they did not have the jurisdiction to admit the death penalty. Okay?
Caiaphas' house. Starting with Luke. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. And all of the chief priests, the elders and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then someone stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands. Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us, if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. You have said so, Jesus replied. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look now, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He is worthy of death, they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you? While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with the Nazarene, Jesus, she said. But he denied it. I do not know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and he went into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, This fellow is one of them. Again, he denied it. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you're talking about. Immediately, the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and wept.
You would be tied up here, and then you can see the legs right there, right? And then along the back wall would have just been like prisoners. So it's, fairly like reasonable that Jesus would have been here for at least some time through the night, and also Peter and John.
Alright, this is from Matthew 27, 1 through 10. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priest picked up the coins and said, It is against the law to put this into the treasury since it is blood money. So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price set off for the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field as the accused him, saying, We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar, and and claims to be Messiah, a king. So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people all over today by his teaching." He started in Galilee and has come all the way. On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. But he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time.
This Herod is governor of the Galilean region, right? So he's also visiting for Passover, right? Because so the fact that he's in Herod's jurisdiction means that so at the time, Israel was divided into basically like 3 provinces, right? There was like a far north, which is Caesarea Philippi was the capital. There was the middle region with, I can't remember the name. Zipporah? No, Zipporah. Or Sepphoris. And then here in this region was Caesarea was the capital, right? So Jesus was under the middle section, and so the Herod that ruled was the one that ruled that section. One thing to note, this is like a footnote, I think, on the sheet, just that all of the sources say that Pilate was like very, very cruel. And it's like Philo and Josephus both say that. I think the story, like from here on out especially, is very like, irony is the way the story is told, right? So Jesus is called Christ or King more times in the next like few hours than he ever was when he was like during his ministry. And I think that's the gospel writers telling you something, right? This is his like coronation. But the other thing is that Pilate, who is supposed to be very evil, ends up finding no guilt in him, right? And the Jews, who are supposed to recognize the Messiah, don't recognize him and want him dead. So now we're going to Herod, right?
Magnifico nome è, che magnifico nome è.
Luke 23, when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day Herod and Pilate became friends. Before they had been enemies.
Plays Palace 2 with Pilate from Mark 15. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with an insurrectionist who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Matthew 27. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Mark 15. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Matthew 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him.
Jesus is crucified outside the city, right? The Holy Sepulchre is inside the city. So there would have been a gate, like just around the corner from here. It was called Ganath. It's called the Ganath Gate by Josephus. Or if you, in Hebrew, it would have been Ganot, which is like gardens. Okay. John says that the place where he was crucified and buried, there was a garden right there. So that fits very well with him going through the garden gate, right? The garden gate, and then being crucified right there. Just another point about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre when we get there. It's like, so the other alternative site is the garden tomb. One of the reasons that makes this site good is, one, the gate called the garden gate, and then two, there have been tombs found within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre from that time period, which means it had to be outside the city walls. And there was a Roman temple built on top of the church very shortly after, which would have been Rome's way of saying, you know, this is our place now, which is just a very normal thing for people to do back then. If you know, like, there's another Via Dolorosa, right, like on the other side of the city, starting at the Lion's Gate. The reason why is because we used to think the Praetorium was over there. Now it's just like everyone knows, like Wikipedia knows, right, that the Praetorium is actually here. So that's why there's the difference, and it actually does fit the geography much better. But you'll see, like, we just passed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's like right there, right? So he didn't go far at all. So this Via Dolorosa is actually much shorter.
He sees Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children, for the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" The two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed.
When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." and they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him, which read, "This is the king of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. It was preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where he was laid.